Welcome, everyone. My name is Michael Chan, and this interview is for the Faith and Firearms Project. I'm here with Pastor John Telyea. Welcome, John.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, John is a former student, currently a pastor on the East Coast, and we're going to get a little bit into his background. But John, thank you so much for agreeing to come and talk with us about guns and your own parish and congregations.
Yeah, it's an absolute honor to be here.
Oh, thanks. John, you have, more than almost any student I can think of, you have thought a lot about masculinity. And it's become a lot. And it's become kind of a part of your ministry, too. And really a way of, you've been tried to embody some of these ideas that you have. Will you just tell us a little bit about that journey and how you try to embody some of your own thoughts here?
Yeah, I grew up playing rough sports. I wrestled, I played rugby, I played football. I didn't play gentle sports. Tennis was not in my daily activity. And went to college, played college sports at Pacific Lutheran University. Go Lutes.
That's right. We both graduated from PLU. I should say that. Oh, let me say one more thing. We're going to get to the gun thing in just a few minutes, but because John has done so much thinking around masculinity, I want to start there, and then we'll get to gun stuff in just a couple minutes. So that's just for the sake of the audience. Yeah, keep going. So yes.
I played college lacrosse, was all conference, my senior year team captain, and was really taught that to be a man was to be rough, to be physical, to be aggressive, and to view others as the enemy. Really fueled by the fact of you want what they have or they're trying to stop you. My first 3 years of playing college lacrosse, I was the bruiser. If someone was scoring a bunch, I was the guy that you didn't want to see coming because cheap shots, late hits, helmet-to-helmet contact were my specialties. And I was pretty good at it. And I took a lot of pride in it. And I would start arguments throughout the week. Just so I would have that fuel I needed to then go inflict pain or damage. And I would justify it of, well, I'm playing sports. So, what would be called assault in daily life, I was justifying it because I was playing a college sport. I guess I really didn't think about masculinity. And then I went to seminary, and I quickly realized that there were not a lot of guys like me. It was my first Super Bowl Sunday, and we were going to have a flag football game, a touch football game. And they asked who played
sports though that don't involve contact. That seems kind of against your full.
Yeah, I know. Well, not saying I didn't tackle a classmate, Brian Raychuk, as he went for the goal line. And he's a smaller guy, so he really didn't have a chance against me. But they asked who played football in high school, and I was the only guy. And I realized, I'm in new territory. And so that spring, I was very fortunate. I got into a CPE program, and you had to talk about your feelings. And I started dating this young woman who is now my wife. And my first feeling reflection paper was very much, I feel this, happy, sad, and angry. Very logical, very boom, boom, boom. And Karen read the paper, and she goes, I'm not sure that's what they're hoping for. And it really took time with her through CPE to realize that feelings are not a bad thing. Feelings are really a window into our soul. And it's not feelings that are bad. They're not good, bad. They're indifferent. It's how we react to our feelings. And so if I get angry or if I'm upset and I go and punch someone, that's a bad reaction. But anger is really allowing me to realize that a boundary for me has been crossed. And so then just started really diving into gender, because I looked around class and the guys I looked with, I mean, to put it bluntly, were sissies. Where I came from, or my experience, they were wimps. And I thought, if this is what it means to be a pastor, then I'm out. I wasn't going to trade in what I would define as my hyper masculinity to be a soft wimp. And then I was very blessed with just having good mentors and really having my wife that really supported me in this journey of saying, no, there's voice. And started doing some reading. Oh, I forgot the author. Katz. I forgot his name. He has done some great with gender and gender issues. And then we actually watched Fight Church at Luther Seminary one night. And I remember the first couple comments was all about how hypermasculinity is bad and we can't have it in the church. And we, all these people who weren't hypermasculine, I felt were making judgments on hypermasculine men. And I sat there and I tried to keep quiet, even though it's hard for me. I'm a verbal processor and I'm blunt. And finally I had to raise my hand and say, that's me. That's who I am. And I'm not condoning what these men do. And I think it can be really disruptive and painful. But maybe these guys haven't had the opportunity to learn what it means to talk about their feelings. And before we throw them all aside and say they don't have any value, what if we listen to them and their stories? Because if it wasn't for my wife, if it wasn't for my CPE instructor, if it wasn't for professors, I would be, again, a hypermasculine guy who thinks that there's really only three feelings: happy, sad, and angry. And so that really, that started my journey, and I continue that. Now I'm playing ice hockey. I'm the goalie, so on a regular basis I get a puck shot at me. I'm training for my first bodybuilding competition, which, if you want to talk about hypermasculinity, there is a great place to start. But at the same time, I'm making a lovely crocheted hat, which is something I also love. And so what I try to do is to show people that you can't put people in boxes, whether you identify as hypermasculine or masculine. We all have traits and characteristics that would put us in different boxes. And really what I'm hoping to engage people in is that, yeah, there are parts of my life that are more hypermasculine. There are parts of my life, I'm starting a garden that are not manly. And so trying to have that conversation and to see people how it's really an ebb and flow between two poles.
And I think your attempt to kind of destabilize some of these caricatures, it began while you were a student, but would you say it continues as a pastor, now that you're a full-time pastor?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because living in an area where it is more hyper-masculine, and then I had a youth set, took away my man card, the first day, because I was helping make pancakes, and well, that's a woman's duty. And I said, well, why? I'm really good at making pancakes. And so I lost my man card, and I haven't gotten it back yet, but I haven't lost any sleep about it. So every once in a while, I enjoy just saying, well, actually, I like crocheting. I'll make you a pretty awesome baby Afghan if you like. So trying to break down these barriers, which we intentionally and unintentionally set up, is a huge part of my ministry. And it's fun to tell people that I'm a hockey goalie at the same time I crochet. Just the look on their faces really, kind of shakes them up a little bit. They don't know how to react. So I enjoy that.
Yeah, I believe that. Well, let's turn to guns. It sounds like, or at least from our earlier conversations, that guns play a pretty significant role in your congregation's life, or at least in the lives of some of your members. Can you just kind of give us a little bit of background, like about how, where guns sort of crop up in the area, in your communities?
Yeah, so guns play, I guess, two distinctive roles. The first is hunting. There are some people in the area that really rely on hunting as a food source. I mean, getting a buck, getting a deer, getting a turkey can really help ease their livelihood. So hunting is big around here. The first day of hunting, I've basically been told we might as well just shut down the church because everyone's going to be out out hunting. There's really going to be no one to listen to your sermon. And I just say, well, does anyone listen to my sermon now? So what's the difference? I hope they listen. And the second is we have two jails here, one in Hollidaysburg and one in Huntington. And so we have members of the police force that have their concealed weapons permit. And so we're playing in two different areas, one more recreationally, and then one more of a livelihood. You know, every day they use their weapon for their job, and so that's kind of a brief synopsis of what I'm working with.
And has the question of carrying concealed in church come up?
I brought it up to a couple members. It was probably a bear that I shouldn't have poked at, but just seeing there was an article in our local paper where a Michigan priest was encouraging his members to open carry at their cathedral, and so that kind of started a conversation, and with a couple people about, all right, you know, we don't, in our constitutions, we don't really have a policy on weapons and open carry or concealed carry. Is it something that we need to start thinking about here? But really, it's kind of a don't ask, don't tell. As long as people don't see it, it's not really there. So,
is it your impression that if people were to carry in an open manner, that it would be disturbing to some of the congregation members, or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I know multiple that if open carry was the policy, that they would find another church.
Yeah, you mentioned law enforcement officers, and I think that kind of takes us to your own story. Can you kind of give us a history of your own history with guns, your encounters with guns?
Yeah, so I grew up. My dad is a Oregon State police officer. He was a lieutenant in the forensics unit, so he had a state-issued 9mm. I always knew where it was stored at the house. He always had a place, and he would carry it on his hip. You know, he'd walk in the door, and I would see it. And but after that, he'd go straight to his gun where he held it, and he would put it in there. So guns were in the house. My grandpa was a huge hunter, pheasant hunter, and so there was always an invitation to go hunting. His requirement was to go through hunter safety, but I was just too involved with playing gentle sports that I couldn't get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go sit out in a duck blind. But you know, going over to his house, there was always a huge gun case, and I think, gosh, he had nearly 20 guns. And then I learned here, probably when I was in high school, that my dad also had his dad's shotgun, which was taken apart, and it was in the house. But I didn't know about that until probably my senior year. So guns were in the house, but they didn't really play a huge role growing up. My first experience was probably at PLU with weapons. I was officiating a football game at Foss High School, which is a pretty highly African-American school, and they were playing Stadium High School, which is a highly Caucasian school. And in the third quarter, there was a racial slur out on the field. People were ejected. We were actually we left the field because there was a fight in the stands and for our own safety. And then I was actually leaving the stadium, and there was a shooting in the parking lot. And so I went diving behind the bleachers, and you know, they locked us in the stadium, which I thought, oh, great, you know, some guy has a gun out there, and you know, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. And so had to wait for about 20 minutes. The police were called. The police were there, but they called in more, and then we were able to leave. But really haven't had an extensive history with guns. Internship, I preached a sermon how I don't own a gun, And by the end of that sermon, I had
how you don't own a gun. Is that what you said?
Yeah, it came up in a sermon where I just said I don't own a gun. And by the end of the sermon, I had 5 offers for shotguns. So it was pretty funny that just mentioning, well, I don't own a gun. That member said, oh, I have an extra shotgun. You can have it. And I was like, no, I'm okay. I don't really have a use for it. So that's kind of a brief history of my experience with guns.
But that experience at the stadium, that's quite significant, though.
Yeah, I mean, that was pretty terrifying. Officials try to get to their cars as soon as possible, and it was a racially charged game. Stadium ended up winning, and then you hear those gunshots go off, and your first reaction is to find safety. Now, I'm not sure, huddling behind a tin bleacher would have done much for some weapons, but yeah, that was pretty scary. It's a memory I think about, when the issues of guns comes up and open carry. No one was shot. It was just 2 gangs, and they were firing warning shots at each other. So yeah, it's not an experience I hope to have anytime soon, to say the least.
Yeah, and in thinking of your own parish and that kind of your own context, has there been any kind of public reaction during these like public debates around guns? Like, I'm thinking, I guess we haven't had one in the very recent future, but is there any kind of just public reaction that you see, public statements about people's views on guns?
The public statements I see, and guns here are really a sign of being an American, in my analysis. So to be an American means to own a gun. And so when there's talks about gun control in any shape or form, it's always whether the government's going to come in and take all of our guns away. We're not going to be able to protect our families. We have a right to bear arms, and so it's a reaction of I think a deeper symptom of this is who we are as Americans, and this is our right as an American. I've heard, you don't take away my faith, my family, and my guns. And I just thought, oh, okay. I don't think that's what they're hoping to do, but I don't know. I haven't had a meeting with President Obama recently, but we are scheduled for next week. So we can talk about that issue then.
I guess you're not so far from him, right? Being
couple hours away.
Right. And what's kind of your own personal reaction to that constellation that you just mentioned of family, faith, and firearms? Like, when you see that, is your reaction to it critical, or do you say, yeah, I can see how that works, or just, yeah, how do you inside respond? I know you can't. I know publicly you might be different, but inside, I guess for me it comes down to a theology of abundance versus a theology of scarcity. Maybe fill that out for us for the listeners who don't quite get that.
Yeah. So a theology of abundance is that for me is we have been blessed by God, and we have what we need. God provides us the things, maybe not everything we want. I mean, I would love my paycheck to be $1 million, but that probably isn't gonna happen anytime soon. But coming from a view that God will provide, that God is with us, that no matter what comes, God will always be there, providing His grace and His mercy. The other end would be a scarcity of, is God with us? I guess is the major question of, we don't have what we need. We're always striving for more. God blesses some and God condemns others, and we don't want to be on the side of which God condemns. And so, for me, the gun debate really hinges on that of how do you feel about God? and in all reality, my own personal feeling is if someone really wants to kill me, they will kill me. I know that. I mean, working with a dad who was a state police officer, and he told my brother and I, he goes, if people really want you dead, anyone will kill you. And that was really comforting, being 16 years old, having your dad basically tell you that if someone wants you dead, you're going to be dead. But I know that earth is not my final resting place. That through the waters of baptism, I've been claimed by a gracious, all-loving God, and that whether I die today, whether I die tomorrow, that my home is with God. Getting back to the gun, and how people react is, when people say, well, people aren't going to take away my faith, my family, my guns, it's really starting from the other perspective of, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to beat you as the other person. I'm going to have the most guns, and kind of whoever has the most guns wins. And I don't know anyone with 28 hands, so I don't know why you need 28 guns, unless you're Rambo, just, firing them all at the same time. But it's really coming from a point of fear that people are going to come in and take away what you have or what you've earned. That's what I kind of hear, when people say you're not going to take this away from me, is really just an underlying sense of fear.
Thanks for,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, in the sense of that guns make us safe, that the more guns we have, the safer we are. And that would be something that I would disagree with, personally.
Let's go there for a second, and let's pretend that there's somebody in your office right now or at your home right now, and the two of you are talking about this issue. And let's say this is a person who agrees with that position you just stated. The guns make people safer. What do you think that person might misunderstand about what you're trying to say?
I think what they might misunderstand about what I'm trying to say is that safety for me is a communal activity, that building strong communities based on trust is where safety comes from. Safety is not a single player game. Even though I love John Wayne and love his movies, it's not a John Wayne approach to being safe. We really need safety in our communities and looking out for each other. That's what builds safety, not having this approach of, well, I have a firearm and so now I'm safe, because what happens if it goes off when it shouldn't? What happens if it's not clean properly and you're not trained properly? So I guess that's what I would try to explain to the individual is, as Christians, we're called into community with one another, ranger, but we're called to be together, and that's what builds safety.
Let me ask a follow-up question, and that is, what do you think guns symbolize to you? Like when you think about guns, what are some of the kind of words and symbols that come to your mind?
When I think of guns, the word tool, guns are tools, and guns are necessary. I'm not here to make the argument that guns aren't necessary, but But guns should be used as tools. Unfortunately, there are people in our society that want to inflict damage on others, and they're a tool that the state and local police officers use. I also know farmers. My brother, his father-in-law is a farmer, and when he's out in the field and he owns 6,000 acres, he has to carry a sidearm. That's just for his own safety. If he'd come up on a wild animal, a snake, something that would pose a threat. So guns are really tools in which we use the same way that you might use a chef's knife or a butter knife or a car. They're tools in which we use to provide safety. So that's kind of a big image for me.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned earlier for your own community, it's primarily law enforcement and hunting. Those are kind of the main places where you see guns come up.
Yeah, I'd also say just, for my own community, it's a symbol, again, it's a symbol of being American. So, you got to have a gun. There's rights about, cultural rights about getting your first buck. I mean, they put it in the newspaper.
When a child gets his or her first buck, it goes in the newspapers.
Yeah, it goes in the local newspaper, and it'll say, with 22 caliber, or, whoever shot this buck, and show a picture of them holding the horns and whatnot. So, but that's part about being American, here, and so having those debates where, for me, I think you can be an American without having a gun. That's where it puts a little of the oh gosh, who is this guy? And my identity as an American is questioned, or as a man. So that's when I pull out my crocheting needles and just start going. So, but.
Right. And then now we're back to the destabilization of caricatures. Right. Well, Pastor John, I really appreciate your willingness to talk with me about this important topic, and it sounds like this isn't the kind of topic that you can just sort of set aside after this conversation and never think about it again, because it's part of your context, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. It's a very huge part, and I've told both council presidents that I feel in our culture that in the next couple years there will be some form of debate about.
You mean in your two congregations, or do you mean more broadly?
Oh, in the two congregations. I think there will be a debate about open carry, concealed carry. What do we do with guns? There's kind of a sense of government really kind of harping down on guns. And I think as that pressure increases, then the church is going to feel a pressure, and people are going to want to, people might, I shouldn't make a generalization, but they may want to show that their American heritage by wearing a gun to church. Openly, and say, well, that's my right to do it. Personally, as a pastor, I would feel uncomfortable if I looked out at my congregation and saw 40 people loaded to the teeth. We'd have to have some conversations about that. But yeah. I think in the next couple of years, if not nationally, but at least here in my context, open carry at church will be a huge issue.
Well, yeah. As those conversations happen, or if they happen, I'd love to just kind of hear how you navigate that, because that's going to be a very difficult conversation to have.
Yeah. Well, I'm not looking forward to that, but I want to be willing and open. I guess that's my thing. Is I have my views about guns, but I hope that I'm willing and open to be changed and transformed by the other other people and their views.
Well, Pastor, again, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah, I'll look forward to kind of following up with you on some of these developments in your congregation.
Sounds great. Have a great time. And again, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.